So, let's begin. We're calling this opening segment Achieving Prosperity, and central to that is jobs. There are two economic realities in America today. There's been a record 6 straight years of job growth, and new census numbers show incomes have increased at a record rate after years of stagnation. However, income inequality remains significant, and nearly half of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Beginning with you, Secretary Clinton, why are you a better choice than your opponent to create the kinds of jobs that will put more money into the pockets of American workers?
Well, thank you. On November 8th.
Secretary Clinton, thank you. Mr. Trump, the same question to you. It's about putting more money into the pockets of American workers. You have up to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Lester. And our jobs.
Secretary Clinton, would you like to respond?
Well, I think that to see again.
Let me follow up with Mr. Trump if I can. You've talked about creating 25 million jobs, and you've promised to bring back millions of jobs for Americans. How are you going to bring back the industries that have left this country for cheaper labor overseas? How specifically are you going to tell American manufacturers that you have to come back?
Well, just because of the fact.
Let me interrupt just a moment.
Secretary Clinton and do it any longer, Lester.
Back to the question, though. How do you specifically bring back jobs, American manufacturers? How do you make them bring the jobs back?
Well, the first thing, a big factor.
Let me let Secretary Clinton get in here.
Let's stop trouble in the first place.
Mr. Trump.
She talks about his big league. End of story.
Let me get you to pause right there because we're going to move into the next segment. We're going to talk taxes.
That can't be left
Please
to stand.
Take 30 seconds.
I kind of assumed that there would be paid their fair share to support this.
Well, you just opened the next segment.
Well, look, could I just finish? I think I should.
I'm going to give you a chance right here.
And you take a look at her website. She's going to raise taxes $1.3 trillion. I would like that too much.
The next segment, we're continuing the subject of...
Well, at least I have a plan to fight ISIS.
No, you're telling the enemy everything you...
Folks,
go to the fact checkers, get to work.
You are unpacking a lot here, and we're still on the issue of achieving prosperity. And I want to talk about taxes. The fundamental difference between the two of you concerns the wealthy. Secretary Clinton, you're calling for a tax increase in the wealthiest Americans. I'd like you to further defend that. And Mr. Trump, you're calling for tax cuts for the wealthy. I'd like you to defend that. And this next 2-minute answer goes to you, Mr. Trump.
Well, I'm really Secretary Clinton.
All right, you have 2 minutes on the same question to defend tax increases on the wealthiest Americans, Secretary Clinton.
I have a feeling that
back into their country.
This is Secretary Clinton's 2 minutes, please.
Who gave it that name? Approach that has a $4 billion tax benefit for top.
Mr. Trump,
typical politician, Secretary Clinton.
Mr. Trump, we're talking about the burden that Americans have to pay, yet you have not released your tax returns. And the reason nominees have released their returns for decades is so that voters will know if their potential president owes money to, who he owes it to, and any business conflicts. Don't Americans have a right to know if there are any conflicts of interest?
I don't mind.
The IRS says an audit of your taxes, you're perfectly free to release your taxes during an audit. And so the question, does the public's right to know outweigh your personal...
Well, I told you, I will if she releases her email.
So it's negotiable?
It's not negotiable. No, let her release the email. Why did she delete 33,000?
Well, I'll let her ask that, but let me just admonish the audience one more time. There was an agreement. We did ask you to be silent, so it would be helpful for us. Secretary Clinton.
Well, I think you've just said you'd provide them.
He also raised the issue of your emails. Do you want to respond to that?
I do.
Your ideas.
Let you respond,
maybe
and we'll move to our next.
Because you haven't paid any federal...
We should be able to do that for our country.
We're well behind schedule, so I want to move to our next segment. We move into our next segment talking about America's direction, and let's start by talking about race. The share of Americans who say race relations are bad in this country is the highest it's been in decades, much of it amplified by shootings of African Americans by police, as we've seen recently in Charlotte and Tulsa. Race has been a big issue in this campaign, and one of you is going to have to bridge a very wide and bitter gap. So how do you heal the divide? Secretary Clinton, you get 2 minutes on this.
That we're seeing today.
All right, Mr. Trump, you have 2 minutes. How do you heal the divide?
Well, first of all, American communities are being decimated by crime.
Your 2 minutes expired, but I do want to follow up. Stop and frisk was ruled unconstitutional in New York because it largely singled out Black and Hispanic young men.
No, there are many places.
The argument is that it's a form of racial profiling.
No, the argument is that...
Secretary Clinton.
Well,
Secretary Clinton, last week you said we've got to do everything possible to improve policing, to go right at implicit bias. Do you believe that police are implicitly biased against Black people?
Lester,
I'd like to respond.
Please.
First of all,
with this problem.
This conversation is about race, and so, Mr. Trump, I have to ask you.
But I'd like to just respond, if I might.
Please, 20 seconds.
I'd just like to respond.
Please respond, then I've got to follow up.
Look, politicians have done.
Mr. Trump,
I think.
Mr. Trump, for 5 years, you perpetuated a false claim that the nation's first black president was not a natural-born citizen. You questioned his legitimacy. In the last couple of weeks, you acknowledged what most Americans have accepted for years: the president was born in the United States. Can you tell us what took you so long?
I'll tell you very important to the country.
I'll let you respond. That's important, but I just want to get the answer here. The birth certificate was produced in 2011. You continued to tell the story and question the president's legitimacy in 2012, 13, 14, 15, as recently as January. So the question is, what changed your mind?
Well, nobody was pressing it. She can't produce.
I'm sorry. I'm just going to follow up, and I will let you respond to that because there's a lot there. But we're talking about racial healing in this segment. What do you say to Americans?
Well, it was I say nothing. I say nothing because I was able to get him to produce it. He should have produced it long. His birth certificate.
Secretary Clinton.
Bring him down.
Mr. Trump, you can respond, then we're going to move on to the next segment.
I would love to respond. First, I feel.
Our next segment is called Securing America. We want to start with a 21st century war happening every day in this country. Our institutions are under cyber attack, and our secrets are being stolen. So my question is, who's behind it, and how do we fight it? Secretary Clinton, this answer goes to you.
Officials who served in Republican in administration
2 minutes has expired.
Have said that Donald that we face.
Mr. Trump, you have 2 minutes in the same question. Who's behind it, and how do we fight it?
I do want to say that there's one of them.
Secretary Clinton.
Propaganda efforts online.
You mentioned ISIS, and we think of ISIS certainly as over there, but there are American citizens who have been inspired to commit acts of terror on American soil. The latest incident, of course, the bombings we just saw in New York and New Jersey, the knife attack at a mall in Minnesota, and the last year, deadly attacks in San Bernardino and Orlando. I'll ask this to both of you. Tell us specifically how you would prevent homegrown attacks by American citizens. Mr. Trump.
Well, first I have to say once.
Secretary Clinton.
Led to.
Mr.
Well, I'd have to respond.
Please respond.
I think so.
Mr. Trump, a lot of these are judgment questions. You had supported the war in Iraq before the invasion. What makes your judgment?
I did not support the war in Iraq.
2002.
That is a mainstream media nonsense put out by her. Because she, frankly, I think the best person in her campaign is mainstream media.
My question is, since you
would you like to hear?
Why is your
the war. Wait a minute. I was against the war in Iraq. Just so you put it out.
The record shows otherwise.
The record does not show that.
Why is your judgment?
The record shows that I'm right. Against the war because he was for the war.
Why is your judgment better than?
And that was before the war started. Sure, that's exactly what it's done. It's been a disaster.
My reference was to what you had said in 2002, and my question was, why is your judgment any different than Mrs. Clinton?
Well, I have much better judgment than she did. Problem.
Secretary Clinton.
Woo! This should be concerned.
That line's getting a little bit old. As far as the nuclear is concerned, that this country has.
Which leads my next question as we enter our last segment here still on the subject of securing America. On nuclear weapons, President Obama reportedly considered changing the nation's longstanding policy on first use. Do you support the current policy? Mr. Trump, you have 2 minutes on that.
Well, I have to scamper.
All right. Mrs. Clinton, Secretary Clinton, you have 2 minutes.
Let me interest and security to be given any opportunities at all.
Is expired.
Let's do one thing I'd like to say.
Very quickly.
I will go very quickly, but I will tell you, not protect countries all over the world where they're not paying us what we need.
We have just a few final questions.
She doesn't say that because she's got no business race. They won't be taken.
Mr. Trump, this year, Secretary Clinton became the first woman nominated for president by a major party. Earlier this month, you said she doesn't have, quote, a presidential look. She's standing here right now. What did you mean by that?
Tremendous stamina.
The quote was, I just don't think she has a presidential look. Wait a minute, Lester, you asked me a question. Did you ask me a question? Has the stamina. Let's let her respond.
Years of that kind of experience.
We are at the final question.
One thing, Lester, is, he tried to switch from.
Okay, good. Let me just tell you.
Mr. Trump, just take 10 seconds and then we're going to have the final question.
Hillary is hitting me with tremendous something extremely rough. And with all of that money, over $200 million is spent. And I'm either winning or tied, and I've spent practically nothing.
One of you will not win this election. So my final question to you tonight, are you willing to accept the outcome as the will of the voters? Secretary Clinton?
Well, I support it because I think it does.
Mr. Trump, very quickly, the same question. Will you accept the outcome as the will of the voters?
I want a 100, and they don't even know.
Will you accept the outcome of the election?
Look, here's the story. I want to order.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for us. That concludes our debate for this evening, a spirited one. We covered a lot of ground, not everything, as I suspected we would. The next presidential debates are scheduled for October 9th at Washington University in St. Louis and October 19th at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. The conversation will continue. A reminder, the vice presidential debate is scheduled for October 4th at Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia. My thanks to Hillary Clinton and to Donald Trump and to Hofstra University for hosting us tonight. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, Lester.
Very much. Thank you.
Trump didn't shake his. Oh, here he goes.